everyone, I'm Ari here with Rachel, and we're your hosts for the Merry Writer podcast. This week we're on episode 273, and we're asking, does using Comic Sans make writing easier? Yes, we are asking that. Before we start, if you enjoy the show, consider checking out our coffee page. You can follow the page for free, as we've got plenty of goodies for all. If you're actually feeling generous, and a one-off donation will get you access to more treats, or you can become a Merry Writer for $2 a month. For this, you get access to all the items in our shop, including exclusive goodies, as well as access to monthly bonuses. All of it helps to support our podcast. If that's not your style, but you still enjoy the podcast, do please consider subscribing wherever you're listening if you haven't already, and please do drop us a like, especially if you're on YouTube. It really helps. Okay, so if you listened to last week's episode all the way through, because it was right near the end, you'll know that we're doing a few silly challenges for ourselves. Just a bit of fun. Not sure why we decided it, but here's what we're doing. We're aiming for like maybe one every 2 months, although I do have a weird feeling that we might have another one next month. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
I think we messed up the math.
Yes,
because we can't follow a calendar apparently,
or read our own notes or anything. So these are going to pop up every now and then, just until we get bored, which give it a few months and we'll probably get bored. So our first silly challenge is obviously writing in Comic Sans. So if you've been in the writing community for long enough, you will have probably heard about the Comic Sans trick, where it's suggested, not sure by who, probably somebody on Tumblr. Everything seems to come from Tumblr. That if you're struggling to write, whether it's due to lack of motivation or writer's block, then Comic Sans will help. It's a magic cure-all. Some even claim that it'll make you write faster. So why is that? There have been lots of reasons given. Some people say that it removes the realness of writing a novel, so there's a little bit less pressure. Some say there's a fun aspect to the quirky font. Obviously, that depends on whether you love or hate Comic Sans. I think there's obviously a big Marmite divide with that font. Where am I? I've already lost my place. Now, there was some research done, I believe, with people who have dyslexia, and it did show that irregular fonts were easier to read. Now, I'm not even sure if they used Comic Sans, but it has that kind of slightly irregular font. Now, whether that translates over to everyone else, even those who don't have dyslexia, who knows? One reason it could be useful is that we don't normally write in Comic Sans, I assume. There might be some people out there going, hey, of course I do. I love Comic Sans. And honestly, any change to font, whether it's size, style, color, spacing, it can help. It can certainly make it easier to spot mistakes. It's one reason why they say if you type your work, you should do at least one edit on a printed copy that's preferably a different font size, because even that change from one medium to another can be enough for your brain to pick up errors that you keep skimming. And I can attest to this because I am on draft 5 of my manuscript of The Blessed, and I am still finding breaking errors that are slipping through the net. It's driving me crazy. So obviously, this is a bit of fun. This is not a scientific paper before people come at us with their own thoughts. There are lots of variables that can affect writing speed, motivation, everything. And we're not sat there checking everything. We're just doing a silly challenge. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rachel because she did a great job of tracking everything with her challenge. It put me to shame, if I'm honest.
I took this assignment seriously, apparently. I find it interesting that what you said about how Comic Sans is like an irregular font, but it makes me wonder if maybe like way back in the day, like eons ago, maybe people did use this type of font and maybe it does work better for our brains, regardless of whether you're dyslexic or not. But because it doesn't look professional, the industry standard changed the font. I wonder if it kind of got lost in translation over the years.
Even things like Arial, which is a professional enough font, it doesn't have the serif, and you find that most printed works work well with the serif because it draws the line, whereas Comic Sans, it's just all over the place. You just lose that nice straight lines, which is a professionalism feel to it. Comic Sans first came when we got on Word and everything, and Comic Sans was one of the things. I think everyone just went to it. I remember being young and finding Comic Sans, and if all you've ever read is serif type print, and then suddenly it's like, ooh, look at this cool, funky font, to the point where it became too popular with people, and then of course you get people coming out going, oh, it's rubbish, that, and pushing back against it. But I would love it if all professional paperwork had that sort of font. Not saying I love Comic Sans anymore, but just to be different, because sometimes you just get a bit tired of seeing the same thing.
Yeah, well, it's dull otherwise. And I think that's part of the reason why it takes us like so long to edit our work and things like that because we're just seeing the same thing. And as Ari said, you should change the font or the size or something to kind of trick your brain to think that you're not looking at the same thing over and over. And as far as the typos, I published my book and I found a couple of typos after it got published. So don't even worry about it. It happens. But anyway, I'll talk about my experience when writing Comic Sans for a week. And in terms of did it work? Sure. I didn't think so at first, but then I wrote my notes and I'm like, you know what? I think it did work. Now I used Comic Sans for 8 writing sessions and it was 8 days. I meant to do 7, but I can't count. So I did 8 days. And the projects I worked on were Happily Ever After Life, half of a short story for my blog, because it was already started, and May's short story for my caffeinated club members on my coffee page. And there were other factors involved from changing the font to Comic Sans. There was the environment. I wrote at my desk and I also wrote at Barnes & Noble. There was also time. I wrote in the morning every single time. It wasn't like the same time exactly to a T. Like some morning when I wrote at home, it would be somewhere between like 6 and 8 in the morning. But if I wrote at Barnes & Noble, then it was somewhere between like 9 and 10 is when I would start because Barnes & Noble doesn't open until 9 a.m. But still, I wrote in the morning. Another factor was music. I created a playlist for Happily Ever After Life, and that's the only music I'll listen to when writing it because it puts me in the mood. And when working on my short stories, I listen to my Objection playlist, which is just a massive like 30-hour playlist of all the soundtracks from the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney games, Professor Layton games, and Murder by Numbers. And finally, weather was a huge factor because the weather was actually nice and it was warm and it was sunny and I am a sunflower and that just energized me. So I was consistent with, my environment, my time, and my music, and then obviously the weather helped out. So I think that's why at first I didn't know if Comic Sans was what made me so productive because there were other factors involved. But I think Comic Sans did have a lot to do with it because the overall total words I wrote writing Comic Sans during those 8 writing sessions was 36,223 words. And that was roughly 16 hours worth of writing.
I'm going to make a very quick point before we talk about that. I like how I specifically said, it's not a scientific paper. There's so many variables. And then Rachel goes and lists all her variables and explains them in detail because this is what she does. So fun challenge.
I told you I took the assignment seriously.
So seriously.
And I didn't even realize it until I wrote my note.
Yeah, you did.
Because I didn't think, I was like, there's no way a font change could make me this productive. So I was like, it's got to be the music. It's got to be the environment. So that's why I was listing everything. But nah, I think it was mostly the Comic Sans.
Right, have to do it for a year and then see how it works. Give it a longer period of time because that's, sometimes scientific discovery needs to be a longer period of time for study because apparently it's becoming a big thing. It's rather than it just being a fun challenge, Rachel's doing very, very scientifically with it. But seriously, 36,000 words in 8 sessions.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I know. If we did Comic Sans for a whole year, that would actually be really interesting because how long would it last before your brain got so used to the Comic Sans that you would stop being productive with it and you would have to go back to a different font or whatever original font you use, whether it's Times New Roman or whatever. I'll just keep talking because I broke my days down. I really did treat this as a homework assignment. Day 1, I wrote 10,014 words total. Now, I had already planned on having a 10K writing day because it's something my sister and I used to do during NaNoWriMo sessions. And it was also just a great excuse for us to have a full day of writing. So we were kind of already planning that. And on that day, my sister and I went to Barnes & Noble and we wrote for about 3 hours before heading home. And believe it or not, I was still in the mood to write. So I wrote 4,362 words of Happily Ever Life, and I completed a short story for my Short Story Sunday, which I ended up writing about 5,652 words for that. I couldn't tell if I was super productive because I was determined to write the 10K, or if it was because, I did it alongside my sister, we switched up environments throughout the day, or that I chose the quote-unquote correct playlist to listen to. or if it was the Comic Sans. And I'll be honest, I didn't think it was the Comic Sans at first because it looked super weird. And I actually did not like how it looked when I started using the Comic Sans. And I was like silently cursing Ari a little bit because I was like, why did she make us do this? When I used to write fan fiction when I was 10, 11, 12, I wrote everything in bold. I don't know why. It was just, it looked better to me. I wrote everything in bold. So when I started writing in Comic Sans, well, Comic Sans is just naturally bolder than some other fonts. And I just did not like the way it looked, and my manuscript looked wrong. And I was like, I just got to push through this. So day 2, I wrote almost 6,000 words of Happily Ever After Life, and Comic Sans still looked bizarre to me. It was really jolting when I opened up my manuscript again, and because I completely forgot overnight that I had changed fonts. And also my manuscript just looks out of whack now because half of it's written in one font, half of it's written in Comic Sans, and it's driving me nuts. But anyway, day 3, I continued the momentum and I wrote more of Happily Ever Life, and Comic Sans was still a little bit jarring. And it took me a few minutes to like get back into my writing again. It's not like I opened up my Scrivener document and I just started writing. It took me a little while to get into it. But by day 4, I was barely noticing the font change, and I wrote a good chunk of words on Happily Ever After, of Happily Ever Afterlife. And days 5 and 6, I continued that momentum for that manuscript. Day 7, what did my notes say? Day 7, skipped writing because I didn't feel like it. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't write anything on day 7, quote unquote. So apparently I organized some stories for Happily Ever Afterlife. I can't say my own title. Did you hear the way I said that?
Perfect. Just perfect.
I'm just gonna keep it. I'm not even gonna correct myself. Anyway, day 8, I wrote the beginning of a new short story. And then day 9, I wrote more of Happily Ever Afterlife. So yeah, so I guess it was technically 9 days, but it was still the 8 writing sessions. So I guess in the long run, I think Comic Sans actually worked. So the first 3 or 4 days were weird because it was so much bolder than the font that I typically use. And I'm really sensitive to bright lights, so I always have my computer's brightness at 0. And seeing the bold font was weirdly bright in its own way, and I don't know how to explain that one, but it was bright and just weird and annoying to look at. But I also think that having an all-day writing session the first day helped me get into the font. So it only took me a couple of days to get used to it. I feel like if I wrote for a typical hour or 2 on that first day, it would have taken me a longer time to get used to the font change. But, you know, by day 5, I barely noticed it, and I was still productive with my writing. So I don't think Comic Sans really hindered me at all. And I will say that at the time of recording this, I didn't add this to my notes because I didn't think about it. But at the time of recording this, I switched back to my usual font after I finished all of this. And I got so super stuck on Happily Ever Afterlife that the last day that I wrote for it, you know, because when I completed the manuscript, I changed it to Comic Sans just for shits and giggles. And I banged out the rest of the manuscript like no problem. So I was unsure at first, but I honestly do think that the font change does help.
That'd be interesting to see if the next time you have another writer's block moment, if that's the first thing you try, just turn it to Comic Sans and see if it gets you through the block. And we'll see like how many times that happens. It can't just be coincidence. You just don't know. I have to say, that's incredible. All those writing days is incredible. I am a little jealous, actually.
Don't be jealous. It really, yeah, I don't really know what else to say about it because it was something that I wasn't expecting. I just thought it was going to be a normal few writing sessions, and I was like, there's no way a font change is gonna, because I've heard about changing the font and the size and the color for editing, but not necessarily for writing. Never really thought to do it for writing, I should say. So I didn't think anything of it, and then here we are. So thanks for coming up with this challenge, Ari. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it sounds like you're so close with Happily Ever Afterlife. See how easy it is? Happily Ever Afterlife.
Yes, I know. It's easy for you. You get the better accent, that's why.
Really? My accent? Oh no. But yeah, so that's probably going to be done soon because you've been writing it so intently.
It is done.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the Comic Sans was what pushed me over the edge.
Damn.
Yeah.
See, look at that. It's perfect. What's it called? That's it. Anecdotal evidence.
Oh,
Perfect anecdotal
yes.
evidence. Now, as usual, Rachel has put me to shame by writing her thesis on Comic Sans.
I gave you a good baseline.
You did, you did. Now, I will hold my hand up and say I did not write as often. Not because of Comic Sans, but because shit going on in my life and with the house and other issues, I just didn't get the writing sessions I needed. And when I did, I was in the weeds with the editing. And I didn't want to mess with the font because it had already screwed up my quotation marks the last time I tried messing with the font. So I'm like, I'm not touching it. Now, that didn't say I didn't try this. I still did some writing sessions. I just didn't do 8 full writing sessions of hours or make as impressive notes. So here's my very roughshod. It feels like Rachel came in with a perfect presentation in a beautiful binder, with cascading tabs. And I've come in with a napkin that I scribbled on and it's got a tea stain on it. This is where I feel with this. But here's mine. I 100% agree that the look of it, especially with that boldness, was jarring. I didn't find it made a big difference. Now, it might be because I already make changes. I write usually in Arial on Scrivener. When I compile it off Scrivener into Word for editing, I change it to Times New Roman. I change the size from, I think it's Arial 10 to Times New Roman 12. If I'm having a bad eye day, because sometimes my eyes get quite sore, I will change my screen size from 100% to 120. So I'm already making constant changes. So the look of my writing changes quite frequently anyway. And if I go and look at older scenes, if I'm in the mood to I'm just going to mess with an older scene from a story I've not been touching, I'll find it's in some other font, or maybe it's double space and I'm writing in 1.5 or something like that. I did find that with some of my new ideas, when I got a new story idea, because of course I freaking did. I tried that, and usually what I find is I'll get a few lines in, and then I'll keep hitting stop points, and I have to go back and then I'll amend it just to get the full meat of the idea down. And I didn't have that issue when I was writing my ideas with Comic Sans. It was flowing brilliantly. Although a silly thing, when I made an error and it did the little red squiggle, it was even more bright. And it really caught my eye. Whereas usually I can ignore it, carry on, and then I'll go back afterwards and scan and think, oh, spelled that wrong. It was like flashing a bright red light at me, and it was like, oh, I'm going to have to go and fix it now. Which was bizarre. I've never had that. Now, it could be, as you said, because it's the bold text, that it makes everything more noticeable.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the contrast between the deep black and then the red on the white, assuming your screen is white. I know some people change the background color of their Word documents too.
Which apparently is very good if you are dyslexic. It
Yeah.
can be quite helpful. And if you've got eye ache as well, a pale yellow or a pale blue is actually quite nice.
Mhm.
But yeah, I did notice, as I said, when I was writing the odd scene or an idea, it was more flowing. But if I messed up, that took me straight out of the flow because I had to fix it. Now, I don't mess up very often when I'm typing, but I can do. And it disrupted me enough that I was getting annoyed at it. Now, if I'd have written 8 sessions or more, like Rachel did, I may have come past it, like you did on your 5th or 6th, was it 4th or 5th, where you kind of stopped noticing the font. I didn't get enough regular writing in it to feel that, so I just kept getting annoyed every time. So as you see, I've got the worst, Rachel give you all these figures and details and variables, and I'm here handing in my napkin saying it was all right, but not perfect. Because I didn't really do a good job on this challenge. And I apologize to everyone listening, if anyone is still listening. But yeah, so those were my results.
In your defense, you're knee deep in edits right now. So, I mean, timing wise, for me, the challenge was good timing because I was trying to finish the first draft of Happily Ever After Life. But for you, wasn't really good timing.
No. But what I might do, to be a bit more honest, what I might do is once these edits have been done and I can pry my fingernails out of it to stop touching the damn thing, I might take a month working on book 2 because I keep getting yelled at that I need to start book 2. And I might just try and write as much as I can in Comic Sans. And then what I'll do is I'll put a blog post up on our coffee page and I will share my results on there. Because I feel like I didn't give it the chance it deserved because I was being shit. I apologize. But using Rachel's information, We could say that Comic Sans has some weird magical ability on our brain, or it could just be a placebo effect that you're aware of, or it could be that changing our font to any other font that's different enough from what we currently use, such as using Chiller or Curly MT or Ink Free, if you've ever tried any of them, they might do exactly the same, because it could just be the novelty that our brains need. Same with sizing, color. I mean, if we changed all of our text to like purple, would that make a difference? I don't know, because actually I'm reading text that's purple right now, and I'm very slow when I type this up because our scripts are in color coded to make it easier. But yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. Yeah, bit of a weird. I feel like Rachel's answer with hers and her results seem to lean heavily that it might be a really good something. What am I saying? It might be a really good. I don't know what I'm saying. It might be a really good. Yeah, it might be a really good idea to try it just to see, if for nothing else, if you're stuck on a writer's block. Or it could be you're sat there going, what a load of, I almost said something I shouldn't say, what a load of rubbish, that's not going to work, I'm not going to try it. But Rach, do you think people should try it just to see for themselves, because it might be what they need?
I think so. And even, I mean, you just said that it doesn't even have to be Comic Sans. You can change it to whatever font you want. I think one of the reasons, I know you're not like writing consistently right now because you're editing a lot, but I think, as you said, it might not have worked for you as well because you changed things anyway. So if you're one of those people that does change the font often enough whenever you get stuck, try doing something else. Try changing the background color or the font color or the font size, and just see where that takes you too, because now I'm curious about trying everything else, but I also don't want to keep screwing up my manuscript. But I do think that there was something to just changing up the fonts into tricking your brain, that even though you've been working on Happily Ever Afterlife for a really long time, seeing the Comic Sans, it's like, oh, hey, this is a brand new shiny manuscript. Let's keep going on this. Even though it's the same like content, your brain thinks it's something else, and you're productive in a weird way, but it works.
Well, that's it. If it is the novelty of a different font, and you try Comic Sans and it works, but then it gets to a point, as you said, where it stops working because you become used to Comic Sans, then there's nothing saying you can't change it to another funky font and try again and sort of cycle through. In which case, you could just be on a constant roll of writing brilliantly.
It could happen. Somebody test that out, because I'm not going to remember.
Yeah, Rachel's already done her intense work, and I couldn't even manage like 8 days, so we're not good for this, apparently.
I'm graduating now. That was my final.
Rachel got her PhD in Comic Sans, so you know.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Everybody needs to start calling me Doctor. Dr. Rachel.
As you see, this was supposed to be a silly, funny challenge. Rachel took it too far, and I took it nowhere. So between the two of us, we averaged out at okay.
I mean, that sounds about right. One of us always does like.
Yeah, that's it. That's actually, yeah. If you look through our scripts, there'll always be like one of us have done like a massive load of notes, and the other one's like, I'm just going to tack on, and then the next one, it's like, I've done a massive.
Yeah.
Back again. It's how we work. It works though, doesn't it? It works.
It does. We balance each other out by being completely unbalanced.
Yes. Yes. Maybe that's why we're so merry, because the unbalanced writer was not available.
Absolutely.
What am I doing? Where am I going with it? Right, yeah, let's end this episode. It's way too long for an episode about Comic Sans. This was just a silly episode, just something fun to do. I hope you enjoyed it. Before we leave, if you'd like to know more about us, the podcast, opportunities to be guest on the show, don't forget to check out our website at themerrywriterpodcast.podbean.com. Now we'll turn it over to you guys, if anyone actually listened to this long. Have you ever used Comic Sans when you're stuck with your writing? Or will you give it a try now as a little mini challenge for yourself? Or if you get stuck again, let us know your answers in the comments. We do like to chat about it. Hopefully we're not just going to get a lot of people griping on about the fact that we talked about Comic Sans. Remember, we do release new episodes every Wednesday. Next week, we're discussing creating and maintaining a writing habit. To ensure you don't miss it, do hit the subscribe button on your way out. And as always, thanks for listening to the Merry Writer Podcast. We'll see you next week. This podcast is brought to you by Buying Books. We never have enough. The music, titled Inspired, is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons 4.0. Boom.